Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me. We're here today to talk about communicating in the workplace. The content I'm working from comes from the textbook by Rentz and Lentz, published in 2018. This is a business communications textbook that takes a problem-solving approach. So let's get going. Communication, rated as one of the top attributes required, if not desired, by the employers. According to the National Association of Colleges and Employers survey that was published in 2015. All right, so communication is important and we need to be good at communication because 1 in 5 projects fail simply because of ineffective communication. So communication, or effective communication, is actually a tool to help us solve problems. When a customer complains, we can think about, how do I respond to that? Where and when do I respond to that? What should I say? What tone needs to be used? So there's techniques in responding to customer complaints, for example. So most business communication problems are actually difficult to define. And so we have to do some research, we have to do some analysis, we have to be creative, and we have to make a call, a judgment as to what we're going to do about it. So let's say, for example, that you work as a startup, at a startup where 2 employees have reported sexual harassment. Now, there's no formal policy in place. This is a startup. They're still working on their organizational policies. And it's your responsibility as the Director of Human Resources to announce a new policy about sexual harassment. All right, so you're in the Director of HR role. What are you going to do about announcing this new policy that has been formulated? Do you think you need to send an email? Do you think you need to do a presentation? Do you think maybe you should post it on the website, on the internal organizational website? Now, with regards to communication skills, we also need to ask ourselves, what communication skills do we need so that we collaborate well together? What kind of literacy skills may be needed in the current environment and then in the future environment? So we have to figure out, what do we currently need in terms of communication skills, and then what do we need in the future? When we're talking about communication, we have to recognize that not everybody in the workplace understands the world in the same way that you or I do. People have different backgrounds. People have come from different cultures. People hold different personal values. Maybe they're not the same color or age as you. Maybe they have a different sexual identity than what you do. Maybe they are at a different stage of life or career development than what you do. But the benefit of workplace diversity is that each of these different personalities, each of these different identities bring together different views. So the point about workplace diversity and communications within diverse organizations is that diversity is a strength. Diversity makes companies stronger and more competitive because of these different points of view that are brought together in a beneficial manner. So you might have worked at somewhere that had a diverse workforce. Maybe your work experience was within an organization that had a low level of diversity in the workplace. And so we need to recognize that diversity is actually a benefit. It's a strength. So High levels of diversity in the workplace means a broad spectrum of perspectives are brought together for the purposes of communication, for the purposes of collaboration. And so trust is actually really critical within the process of effective communication, especially when we're talking about diverse populations being involved in a close work environment. Now, I wonder if you agree with that statement. When we're talking about professionalism, we're talking about something beyond etiquette. We're talking about being respectful with our communications, being adaptable with our communications, having a high service orientation, and a strong work ethic. So while etiquette and good manners is important with regards to professionalism, the goal of manners is actually to build positive relationships. Here's a question for you. You make the call. You see if this is professional or not. A clothing store cashier talks on the in-house headset to a co-worker about a demanding customer. Okay, standard scenario. What do you think? Is that professional or not? Does that happen? What about a doctor referring to some other patients without revealing names that are similar to your own? Do you think that's professional or not? A bank CEO texts some potential clients to ask them to join him for after-work drinks. Do you think that's professional or not? These three questions are questions related to professionalism in business communications. So is this email that Noelle sent to Susan. Have a read through it and ask yourself, is this email professional or not? We'll talk about it in class. Okay, now there's actually different categories of communication. There's internal communications and there's external communications. So the director of human resources sending an email to all employees about the new policy that has been formulated on sexual harassment, that's internal communication, right? That's within the organization. It's internal. But we also have external communications. And this graphic shows the different external audiences that business communication involves. We have our customers. We have the public at large. We have our industry partners, like our competitors, for example, our suppliers, suppliers, Rents and Lents put them in a different category of partners that they refer to as core business partners. All right. And then there's the governments, like whichever governing bodies have control over regulation. Maybe sometimes legal experts or trade groups, for example. Okay. Now, within an organization, we also have formal networks and informal networks. So formal networks are about, this fellow is the CEO and here are the managers that supervise the rank and file workforce, right? So that's a formal structure of authority. So the formal network is very well established along operational lines. And it depends on the organization. So the formal networks are definitely made known within the organization. So you as an employee will know who is your direct report, who is your direct supervisor, who do you report to. This is part of the formal network. Now, the informal network, right, when Mandy has been the personal assistant to the CEO for 25 years, right? She doesn't have any formal authority, but she is definitely part of the informal network. That she holds the power to say who gets to talk to the CEO. And Mandy, as the personal assistant who's been there for a long while, the personal assistant to the CEO, she has a network of co-workers that she talks to on a relatively frequent basis. And so she has this inner circle of influence. So informal networks are harder to identify, but they're no less powerful is the point. So this graphic is showing us the formal network, the formal structure of the organization. We go from division manager down to the department managers, down to the rank and file, right? So the black lines show the formal network. And you can see the red lines have far more complexity, and they're dynamic, which means that they change all the time. So you have to keep up with it. To be smart, you have to keep up with it. Now, let's talk about organizational culture. So organizational culture that for an organization that has been well established for the past 100 years, of course, has a very strong formal network as well as informal network, right? They also have a strong organizational culture. But because they've been established for 100 years, it's probably old school, right? So the people who hold authority in the formal networks are probably getting around in a suit. They probably don't like casual Friday. They don't like wearing jeans to work. It's out of their comfort zone. Now you contrast that, you compare that to a startup that's run by millennials, right? And you're going to see something more along the lines of an organizational culture that's demonstrated in the graphic here on the slide. There's going to be beanbags to lounge around in. You're probably not going to see anybody wearing a suit. They're more comfortable in the blue jeans. And that maybe they're more comfortable with ad hoc meetings even, rather than scheduled, very formal style of meetings. Maybe they're a plastic-free and a paper-free office. Everything is electronic. Whereas in the old school organization that's been around for 100 years, maybe the people in charge don't even like email, right? And they're definitely not active on social media. So the organizational culture is particular to the organization, and it's not always good. And organizational cultures are something that are very stable and established. It's hard to change. It's not necessarily dynamic. It can be changed, but it takes a lot of work. All right. So when we're talking about communication, what we're seeing here in this graphic is that there is somebody like me, for example. I am sending you a message. Now, it turns out that my message is something to do with communication, right? And you are receiving this message. My chosen channel for this message that I'm sending you is the Zoom platform, right? Now, you, as the receiver of the message, you may well choose to respond to this message. Maybe you'll send me a question on the email. email is then your chosen channel of communication. We'll talk about this role play in class. But basically, the point of it is that sometimes communication is negative, and context has got a lot to do with whether or not the message is interpreted as positive or negative. Okay, so the sender of the communication, in this instance, is me. I have sensed a need to communicate to you, the student, about the communication process. So I am deliberately establishing at the beginning of this recording that I'm going to talk about communication today. And I did consider possible communication strategies, and I decided that a recording provided to you on Canvas is one option. Discussing these communication aspects in class is another way that I'm going to reinforce the message. So I selected my intended actions, and I'm using this PowerPoint to support my delivery of the message, and I'm going to post it in Canvas, so in that way I'm sending you the message, right? You, as the viewer of this recording, are the receiver of the communication. So you receive the communication, you receive the message, you interpret the message, you decide on how you're going to respond to the message. And so when you respond, you're actually transitioning then from the role of receiver to the role of sender, because you are then sending a message. Okay, so what's the bottom line of business communications? Well, the goal is to deliver a message so that the message is interpreted accurately in a way that the sender intended. So the sender and receiver should ideally have a shared understanding of whatever situation is being discussed. And the point of it is effective collaboration. The point of it is a workplace where people succeed together. So there you go. That's a short clip for you all about business communications. Thank you for your attention, and I welcome any questions that you may have.